What is up, all of you awesome and amazing people on YouTube? The Old Coot here, coming at you with another exciting video. Okay, so if you saw part one in this series of how I'm making pasta dough, now we're at our dough ball, right, which is about the size of like a huge grapefruit or a little bit bigger than a softball. To quickly recap, it's 1 part semolina, 2 parts whole wheat flour, 3 parts high protein flour. If you only want to use all-purpose flour, that's totally fine. But what you cannot do, at least as far as I know, that I wouldn't recommend, is try not to use only whole wheat flour or even whole wheat flour semolina. It just doesn't come the right way. What happens is the dough, when you start boiling it, will start coming apart like in clumps. It won't stick together to get correctly. What you want is you want the high protein flour. I like Kyrol is the type, right? Kyrol has a lot of protein in it, more than just regular all-purpose. If you want to use like 00 Italian flour that has high, as long as it's a high protein flour, like take a look at the other flours that your vendor is selling, supermarket store, whatever, and just compare. And as long as the pasta flour that you're buying or the 00 flour that you're buying has higher protein than the others, you should be okay. Okay, so anyways, 1 egg for every 100 grams of total flour. So we made 6 portions here. There were 6 eggs, 600 total grams of flour, and then it's a half a teaspoon of salt for every 1 portion. So basically 6 half teaspoons translates into 3 full teaspoons. So the total recipe also requires a little bit of water, right? What I did was I found that this ratio of flour to egg needed 2 tablespoons of water. Just regular old sink water is totally fine. If you want to knock yourself out and use filtered water, bottled water, makes no difference. Anyways, basically it's 1 egg, 100 grams of flour, half a teaspoon of salt, and maybe, I don't know, whatever the math comes out to, like a quarter of a teaspoon of water, half a teaspoon of water per serving. Then you can multiply, subtract, divide, cross, coagulate, conjunction, junction, what's your function, whatever you want to do to alter the recipe, be my guest. But the basic recipe was for 6 people, 6 portion sizes. So we are at this point now. I put some olive oil around the dough ball before I put saran wrap over it, right? Just to cover it for a half an hour to an hour to let it rest. You want to make sure that after mixing your dough ball together, you let it rest for at least a half an hour. An hour is preferred, just so that those protein bonds can form, right? You're going to get a more homogenized ball of dough where everything is mixed together correctly. And also you want your flour to hydrate with the egg and the little bit of water that's in there. Make sure you get proper hydration. Okay, so with that being said, we're here. 12-inch kitchen knife, chef knife, whatever. You could use whatever knife you want. Basically what I want to do is I want to cut this up into, give or take, around a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch slices. Even a little bit bigger is okay. This is the mix, or the pasta machine that I'm using. It's a hand crank style. There are so many of these on the market. I will try to find a link to the best bang for the buck and put that down there below in the description section. Also, I did put a link to the chef's knife, some of the boards that I'm using. Virginia Boys Kitchens make some great cutting boards that you can flip over and just use as, mixing, or boards to mix your ingredients on, all that good stuff. You can kind of do whatever you want. You can just use the board that came in the house that you bought, the apartment, whatever, makes no difference. But anyways, this is how I'm doing most of my rolling. If you wanted to use an actual rolling pin, like an actual rolling pin, 1952 called and they want the rolling pin back. This is this is 2023. Hello technology. We're going to be using a pasta machine to roll out our dough. So, but there's nothing wrong with this. All kidding aside, there's nothing wrong with using one of these if you want to use one of these and roll out your own dough by hand. It's just a lot more work. You get a better workout. Knock yourself out. Okay. So here's my dough ball. What I want to do is I just want to cut it up into about, give or take, around like 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch slices. So I'm just going to do a few, just so you kind of get the idea. We're not going to make all this, obviously. This is how I would do it if I was going to, make this for like I was going to make it for myself and then have enough left over. Leave it as a dough ball. That's what I usually do. Wrap this back up in saran wrap, plastic wrap, whatever. Leave it as a dough ball. You can throw this in the fridge. Usually within 2 to 3 days, you want to try to use it though, because after 3 days, maybe even 4 days, you start getting like a darkening of the dough and the flour, and it's kind of getting sketchy if you want to be using it or not. But anyways, you can go ahead and wrap it up. If you do want to roll out your pasta and then dry it, you can totally do that. Just keep in mind that we did use a half a teaspoon of salt per every one portion. The reason why I did that was because when you boil your pasta, that's going to be video number 3. When you boil your pasta, remember, not as much water and salt has a chance to get into your pasta dough or your pasta because it's already hydrated. The cooking time for fresh pasta is quick. It's like 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes max. So whereas like if you started with a dry pasta, it takes longer because the pasta has to rehydrate with the pasta water. So you would, basically what I'm trying to get at is fresh pasta, you use more salt in the dough. Dry pasta, you don't use as much salt in the dough. That's a whole nother video for a whole nother day, but for now, let's just stick with this. Okay, so always have some flour on hand. If you're using all-purpose, use the all-purpose. I like to use the high-protein flour just to kind of make sure that everything stays dry. So remember, we were at hydration to get our dough ball to hydrate. Now we're erring more on the side of dry. It's better to be dry so that it goes through the machine quicker and easier. You get the idea. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of flour and just kind of flour my board here. I've also pre-floured this board, my rolling board. Get your hands floury, and basically what you want to do is you just want to press, right? Just press down into your dough. Try to get it somewhat flat if you can. Make sure to flour both sides before this all goes inside of the pasta rolling machine. And there's really no rhyme or reason to this. I'm going to be making, I think, a thicker type of linguine, almost like a pappardelle, almost like somewhere between a linguine and a pappardelle. But basically what I want to do is I'm at this point, I'm at the widest setting on my pasta roller. Here's where your hands and everything around you gets floury. Wear a apron if you can. But basically what I want to do is I want to just go ahead and put this in, right? So my dough goes in and I'm just rolling away. And this is going to be our first pass. So it's not as, it doesn't have to look pretty. You just want it to do the job and get the job done. So I'm rolling away, right? My board's rolling, I'm rolling, everybody's rolling, rawhide. Okay, so let's get that all in there. Normally I would do this on my dining room table, but just because this was better light and easier place to work with, that's why I decided to do it here on the kitchen countertop. And less of a chance of stuff moving around. Please do this and attach your pasta maker to like a nice solid surface like your dining room table. Otherwise, what's likely to happen is your pasta machine is going to roll off, take the board and the flour with it. You get the idea. You want to make sure you're on a balanced, solid surface. I did put the flour here on the end of my cutting board so that the whole thing wouldn't just go flying as I rolled the dough. But anyways, this is our first pass and our first roll. What I want to do is fold this in half now. And now is where you can start making or getting things to look a little more prettier. But what I want to do is I just pressed it in half and just using the residual flour that's here, right? I want to make sure I flour both sides just lightly. You don't need to overdo this. But see how I've got this unevenness here? This is where I want to pass it through the roller one more time. See if I can give you a little bit of a different angle this time. So basically I'm rolling, it's going through the machine. I'm going to let the side go and basically just hold and turn, and your dough is going to come out this side. So turning, squeezing, and there we go. Okay, so now we've passed it through the machine twice on, let's say, the thickest setting. I'll teach you a trick. See, notice how we have almost like a flag. Like if you trade the stock market, you have like a what is it, a bear flag or a bull flag here. What you can do to even this out basically is now fold it in like thirds. And then instead of rolling it this way, you can roll it this way. So what I'm going to do is turn this 90 degrees, right? I hope this is all coming up on camera. Turn this 90 degrees, and now I want to roll it this way so that now I've got two clean edges. I've got a clean edge here and I've got a clean edge here, right? And just give it a little press. And like I said, just with the residual flour that's on the board, just very light. There's hardly anything here. I just want to make sure I flour both sides. And then I'm going to go ahead and pass this through the machine again, through the rolling. Sometimes it takes a minute to catch And you can always press this in if it's not catching correctly, but sometimes it takes like a couple turns to catch. And then what I want to do is press. And like I said, there's really no rhyme or reason to this. As long as it all goes in there, the rollers in there are helping to press the dough together. And obviously I would be using 2 hands and getting this a little more prettier. But anyways, you get the idea. Once you're at this point, right, now it's time to reduce the distance between the 2 rollers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down like 2 notches or 3 notches or whatever, right? And then just do another reduction. And let's go in this way. So there goes my dough. My dough is in there, right? You can lay it across. Normally you would do this with 2 hands. I mean, obviously I'm trying to like deal with the camera and everything else, but you kind of get the idea. So as you're rolling, right, let's roll this. See how your dough's coming out, and obviously you want to grab this. Great idea for doing this with like the kids. Make sure everybody's hands are clean. I hope you all washed your hands before starting this process, but you get the idea. Do it with a friend, you know, significant other, date, you know, this is a great date night idea. Do whatever you want to do. But basically, as you roll through now you've got a more homogeneous dough. Okay, so how thin or thick you roll this is completely up to you. I like somewhere around level 3 or 4. I'll go down another 2 notches here, but I like somewhere around 3 or 4 notches thin before I start rolling it in the linguine cutters, right? You could also do spaghetti if you want. You could do whatever you want to. I noticed though that if you are going to do the spaghetti, let the dough dry out a second. Like let it sit on the board for about maybe 10 minutes before you start rolling out the spaghetti, because it's a thinner space between the cutting blades, and you want to avoid gummy clumping. So the way you do that is just let your dough dry out a little bit, maybe 5 minutes on each side. Like just lay it out on the board with a little bit of like residual flour again. Remember, I'm using like very little flour every time I pass this thing through. So very little flour, right? Just get both sides. If you want to make the spaghetti, like I said, just let it sit for about 5 minutes on each side, flip it over, you know, halfway through the process or whatever. But because we're making the linguine, and I've done this a million times, I know it's not going to clump or stick. So trust me on this one. Okay, so because this is going to be the final squeeze, I'm going to just put a little extra just residual flour on there to make sure I get it all in there, right? Make sure I have a nice drier type surface. So now what I want to do is this is going to be my final squeeze. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in here, and here's another angle if you just want to see what that looks like. So I'm turning the handle, letting it go in, and then I'm going to flip this over to this side and then just basically pull from this side, right? I hope this is coming out. Let me see if I can stop the shaking. But basically I'm just pulling and turning and pulling, and there we go. So we started with a piece that was a little bit bigger than this, right? And now we're at a nice sheet of pasta. In my honest opinion, I like rustic style. There's no reason to trim the ends or trim or whatever. That's part of the joy of eating homemade pasta, is irregular lengths, and if you get a little bit of extras in there, that's fine. If you were going to do this for like a formal dinner party, you know, you're learning how to be a caterer, that kind of vibe, and you really need perfection and precision, here's where you would come in with like a nice long knife, such as this Victorinox chef knife, and go ahead and trim up all the edges so that you have a perfect rectangle. If you wanted to do that, if you're a perfectionist, be my guest. But in my case, I like it rustic. That's how I'm doing this. Okay, so my handle comes out. I'm going to go now to the linguine attachment that's in the middle. And now here's where having a friend helps, because as you're rolling, your friend could be pulling the strands of pasta out. But the goal is, I'm just going to explain it and then we'll actually do it. The goal is to try to get your sheet pasta in, start turning and cranking, right? And then after you've pulled it through, then you want to lay it out on some flour. So here I've got some flour laid out. I can even put a little bit more if I wanted to. Just a drizzle of flour. You don't need a whole lot, but just a little bit. This is like ball bearings, right? This is what helps to create a nice surface so that your pasta, when it comes out, won't stick to itself, right? And tossing it in flour helps to seal because as you cut this, you're going to be exposing a wet seam, right? The wet, moist interior. So as you cut the pasta, having the flour here will help to seal those seams so that all of your pasta strands are basically like coated in flour, top, bottom, sides. You get the idea. So the length of, take a look here from far away, the length of your dough at this point is going to determine the length of your pasta. I like longer linguine for this video, so that's what we're making. That's why it's so long. If you wanted shorter noodles, like if you wanted to cut this in half and just have a noodle that's only that long, more power to you. I think size matters. Many puns intended, especially when you're Italian and you're making pasta. Okay, so with my dough laid out, right, it's had a chance to dry a little bit. Maybe that was about a minute or two of just drying, which is kind of ideal. You could just keep rolling it straight, or you could let it dry even more. What you don't want to do is you don't want to go past the point of no return. If the phone rings and you're on the phone for an hour and a half and then you come back to this, it will be a solid sheet of pasta. So time is kind of the essence here. If that happens, what you can do is get a spray bottle or just wet your hands and just try to rehydrate the surface of the pasta if it got too dry where it's cracking and crumbling inside of the pasta machine. But usually the process is flatten it out and roll it out, right? And get that process going. Okay, so I'm going to use the edge that has the most truest edge, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but I would not want to start over here, because if I started over here, you've got this irregular edge going. Like if I square it up to the board, you've got this irregular edge here. And if you started rolling this out, you might get some binding and stickage in the pasta roller. So that's why I want to try to use a more straighter edge as I go. So here we go. This is going to go in now. And the trick that I found was just hold it like you're holding a tray of food. Like if you had any waiter or waitress experience, hostess, you get the idea. But basically your edge goes in and just give it a little squeeze at first, just a little press to kind of start the process. And then as you roll, the machine will just take it up. Right? And if you notice like you're getting a little bit of binding here, like I did, like it almost wanted to curl over, what you can do is pull your pasta back over, right? So pull your sheet back over, and as you roll, right? Let's pause here for a second so I can show you what's going on underneath. Let's take a look at that. So here's my strands of linguine coming out. Look at how perfect that is, right? They're all separated, and I want to try to maintain this shape and this form. So as I continue to roll out the dough, I'm going to try to pull these as I go to keep them. And like I said, because this is rustic pasta, see this edge right here that's not exactly perfect? That's fine. In my opinion, that's fine. If you want to discard that, you could, roll it back up into a ball, re-roll it again, do whatever you got to do. But for me, this is looking beautiful. Okay, so with that being said, let's continue. We'll try to do a little pull here. Let's get that going. Let me do a little more rolling. So I'm rolling rawhide, right? And I'm trying to get my linguine out. And there we go. And good idea too to have flour on your hands, right? If you feel like you're sticking to the dough or the dough's sticking to you, just go ahead and dip your fingers into your flour, right? And then get both of your hands together. Try to get some flour on both of your hands. Yes, this is a messy process. Like I said, make sure you're wearing an apron as you do this, but go ahead and continue to roll. So let's roll out. Okay, so we just rolled out. Now what I want to do is I want to grab all of my individual strands and just be gentle here, very, very gentle. And what you can do is, if I turn this, let's see if I can do this. Okay, so now basically what you can do is you can take all of your strands, right, and just very loosely, gingerly, try to separate them out. It does not have to be perfect, right? If you're the type of person that you want everything to be perfect like that, more power to you. But like I said, this process here does not have to be perfect. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm trying to pick up some of that flour that's on the board and basically gather it so that now I've got a little, like almost like a little bird's nest of pasta. So see how gorgeous that came out? This, believe it or not, is about one portion size. So believe it or not, it's about a portion because it is going to swell up a little when it hits your salted boiling water. What I would do is continue to roll out whatever, pasta you're going to make. If you want to make all 6 portions and then make your pasta, put it in the freezer, keep it in the fridge, pre-plan your meals. If you're doing like meal prep, that kind of vibe, you could do whatever you want. But for me, what I would do is I would leave this sitting for a couple minutes, not too long, but just a couple minutes. as I'm rolling out the rest of the dough, so that by the time I finish the last of my dough, then I can start my boil on my water, and then that'll be video part 3. So stay tuned. Anyways, if you like what you're seeing, you bared with us this far, go ahead and hit the like button down there below, hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up, give me a like, hit the subscribe button down there below, and make sure to check out the description section for some links to some pretty cool products down there. I'm the Old Coot. We'll be back with video part 3 where we actually boil up this pasta, so stay tuned.